Probably the most anti-inflammatory nut or seed that's out there, legit. It's also the highest protein seed or nut that's out there too, which makes it even better. Not to mention the highest omega-3 nut or seed that's out there, which makes it even better. I'll tell you directly what it is. I don't want to dangle it in front of you forever. It's called Sacha Inchi. But stick with me through this video because we're going to talk about how it works. We talk about really how you can utilize it, but also some other mechanisms because it's really interesting. Like they're continually doing research. There's another big study that came out in 2024 on this stuff because we're just learning more and more about it, especially as it's gaining popularity. So do stick with me through this video. It helps the algorithm, but also I give the answer up front. So do me a solid and stick with me and drop a comment down below for the algorithm. It does help. All right. So Journal of Food Biochemistry, this particular study, super wild. They took metabolically healthy and metabolically unhealthy people. So 20 people that had good, healthy mitochondria, 22 people that were dealing with like metabolic dysfunction. And they wanted to see like what would happen if they fed them a really low quality breakfast that would cause all kinds of inflammatory markers to go up and yada, yada. Okay. So they gave them like a high carbohydrate plus high saturated fat breakfast. Okay. One group they gave Sacha Inchi oil to, and another group they didn't. The Sacha Inchi oil ended up triggering a massive change, like within very short term. So essentially they measured biomarkers before they had the breakfast, at 1 hour after, and 4 hours after. In the metabolically healthy people, okay, the healthy people, Sacha Inchi had a nice effect at reversing the temporary rise in cholesterol that would come after a meal like that, but also squelched their interleukin-6 levels. So it lowered the inflammatory response to the food. This is really important because if you ever had one of those meals where you just feel cruddy afterwards and you feel inflamed, okay, well, sometimes we do have always an inflammatory response to food, but this was particularly interesting. But in the metabolically unhealthy people, it actually reduced lipopolysaccharides. It reduced the inflammatory response, essentially, resulting from compounds from gram-negative bacteria in the gut. What that means is these lipopolysaccharides in unhealthy people are what usually kickstart inflammation in many ways. But not to mention, the unhealthy people also had a reduction in the gene expression of interleukin-6. Okay, come on, Thomas, tell me what that means. It means that at the core root, they were expressing less inflammatory genes. So it's like inflammation is one thing, but if you have the genes that kind of turn on inflammation, that's a different story. So they had less of the actual genes after eating this meal, which was really interesting. So when Sacha Inchi was in the equation, it helped negate some of the negative aspects. That doesn't mean that you go out and eat garbage, but it's telling us something really interesting. And it has to do with the antioxidants and the anti-inflammatory mechanisms that we have behind Sacha Inchi. It's kind of interesting because if you look at a study that's published in the Journal of the Science of Food and Agriculture, it was a rodent model study, and they actually looked at the effect of Sacha Inchi on the skin, and they found that there was better collagen formation, there was better skin moisture, better antioxidant capacity in the actual skin, and a reduction in malondialdehyde, which is a marker of oxidative stress. So we're talking about an oil that is in a nut, or in this case a seed, that is so potentially anti-inflammatory and so powerful as an antioxidant, it's actually radiating all the way into the skin. That is really interesting. But when we look metabolically, we're seeing some more interesting stuff. There was a study that was published in the Journal of Pharmaceuticals. This particular study was looking at cardiovascular disease risk, and they found that Sacha Inchi oil, not just Sacha Inchi seeds, but the actual oil itself. So it's not just about the fiber in the seed. The oil itself seemed to have a benefit on cardiovascular disease risk markers. And the study says, and I quote, "Protective aspects of Sacha Inchi against these cardiovascular disease risk factors is primarily attributed to its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties." What they found in this study was that Sacha Inchi oil and Sacha Inchi seeds in general would increase this really cool thing called PPAR alpha. It sounds so gobbledygook crazy, but it's very simple. Essentially, it's making the mitochondria more efficient and have a stronger affinity for fats. So it makes it want to burn fats more. This doesn't necessarily mean you're magically going to burn fat and lose weight. It means your mitochondria is getting better at using fats as a source of fuel. As a result of this, there's a decrease in leptin, which improves leptin resistance. There's an increase in what's called adiponectin, which is going to increase all kinds of different, like a cataclysm of benefits from an inflammatory standpoint. All this leading to less hunger and more fatty acid oxidation. The more that our mitochondria can use fats as a fuel, the more it's going to be satiated, right? So this is really important. We used to think it's just about like sort of the fiber aspect. And Sacha Inchi is very high in good quality fiber. It's very high in protein. But now we're seeing it's more about the fatty acid profile. We used to think that it was more about the fiber because Sacha Inchi seeds have a lot of fiber and it's great. And then we would think, okay, it's the fatty acid profile, which is some of the best, if not the best fatty acid profile of a nut or seed I've ever seen, right? It's high omega-3, but it's counterbalanced perfectly. So even though it's a high polyunsaturated fat, you're having the good fats and you're having the fats that kind of counter any negative that people would usually find from polyunsaturated fats. It's such a high omega-3 level. So in fact, like just a simple serving can have a couple thousand milligrams of omega-3s. So that's beneficial, but what we're really finding is it's actually the antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. There's really interesting compounds in it. There's something specifically called beta-sitosterol, which is a phytochemical that is in Sacha Inchi that is not only good for anti-inflammatory properties, but it seems to be specifically anti-inflammatory for the joints, which explains why there's some really interesting evidence coming out, like a newer study in 2024 in the Journal of Pharmacology looking at Sacha Inchi for rheumatoid arthritis. Now, rheumatoid arthritis is an inflammatory condition. I mean, arthritis in general is, but rheumatoid, that's like RA. It's very hard to tack down what's going on there because it's just chronic and systemic inflammation, but it's also manifesting in the joints. So they found that Sacha Inchi decreased these inflammatory markers associated with it directly at the joint level, and this beta-sitosterol, it's harder to say, has a direct impact on the joint inflammation, which is really wild. So we're uncovering more there. There's a couple of Sacha Inchi brands out there, but the one that I've recommended for a long time is called Brass Roots, but they now have one that's really interesting. They have a Sacha Inchi butter, which is a great alternative to peanut butter, or it's perfect for like a kid's lunch, right? So because it's tree nut and peanut free, it makes it much more allergy safe. So it's good for bringing to school and things like that. But it's something like I can't have peanuts. I have a histamine response to peanuts. So this has been a great replacement for me. But this is a way to get more of the actual fat that you're looking for from this seed, right? You can still get the fiber, you can still get the nut. That's totally fine and dandy. But in this case, you're really capitalizing on the benefits of the oil and the benefits of the antioxidants. Plus, it is super smooth and it tastes amazing. So it's a really good way to just have an alternative, something that's a little bit better for you than the traditional kind of almond butter and peanut butter, which are super high in phytic acid and have a bunch of these omega-6s that are problematic. It's nice to have a nut butter or a seed butter that's really high omega-3 and much more stable in that respect. So I'll put a link down below. That code TD20 gets you 20% off their website. So go to their websites down below in the top line of the description, Brass Roots Foods, and that code TD20 at checkout gets you 20% off. You can get their seeds, you can get all that stuff, but the Sacha Inchi butter, they also add probiotics too. So you're getting the probiotics, you're getting a bunch of protein. It's the highest protein seed that's out there, and you're getting all the other good stuff. So that link is down below. Now the metabolic piece gets extra interesting though. There was a study published in the Journal of Food and Function, and it was looking at the effect of Sacha Inchi and how it impacts metabolism, like glucose and insulin and all that. So in this case, they gave humans a high saturated fat and high carbohydrate meal for breakfast. And once again, they gave them Sacha Inchi oil along with this. Really interesting stuff. They found that the Sacha Inchi oil group ended up having a reduction in glucose from the meal immediately. And it wasn't just because of the fat, it was more so because of the antioxidant effect. And at 4 hours after the meal, they had an increase in what's called sirtuin-1 expression. If you've ever looked at Dr. David Sinclair's work, he was big on sirtuins, SIRT1, NMN, NR, all these things that are good for longevity, right? And sirtuin-1 is a really important gene that gets expressed that signals we're using fat better, and it's really good from a longevity perspective. And this probably has to do with the fact that Sacha Inchi seeds are quite high in resveratrol. So resveratrol is a unique antioxidant in the sense that it actually can activate sirtuins. That's what Dr. David Sinclair would always talk about. So it's a very legit thing, and it makes perfect sense that SIRT1 would be activated. So what does this mean for the human that's just using it? It means it's going to help upregulate mitochondrial health and transfer energy into the mitochondria better. And it's going to serve as an antioxidant that's going to basically help energy be made more efficiently and cleaner. But you back that up with a study that was published in Preventative Nutrition and Food Sciences This one was interesting because it found that Sacha Inchi oil, once again, had a direct impact on insulin as well. It improved insulin sensitivity, but it also improved insulin sensitivity at the actual pancreatic beta cell level, and it increased the expression of insulin signaling proteins. So across the board, this is like a metabolic reboot sort of seed. And I'm not saying that other seeds aren't good. There's lots of good seeds out there. There's lots of good nuts out there. But when you're looking at the straight data from a metabolic, potentially blood glucose, lipids, all these things, it's very clear that Sacha Inchi is unique. Like, it stands in a league of its own, which is why we're seeing more and more research coming out. As a matter of fact, there was a study that just came out not that long ago that was published in the Journal of Food Sciences. It was done out of Taiwan, but they were looking at all kinds of different nuts and seeds. What they found is that Sacha Inchi had the highest omega-3 content at 44%. It was the highest protein nut and seed, and that was at 47, almost 48% protein. That's ridiculous in a nut or a seed. And then they found it had the second highest level of resveratrol, and some of the highest levels of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory components, including that beta-sitosterol. So we're talking something really cool here. At the end of the day, this is something that you may want to consider having probably earlier in the day, since it can help modulate glucose throughout the day. Maybe not something you want to have right before bed. It'd still be fine, but having it in the morning or lunch could stabilize glucose and lipids throughout the day, helping you feel a little bit better and possibly even making you feel a little less inflamed. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.